When life hits you with the unexpected, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice to have a book or a blueprint telling you exactly how to respond? In most cases, of course, that's not possible, but today it sort of is. Studio 5 parenting contributor Heather Johnson is talking about ADHD. She's sharing what to do and how to respond after your child is diagnosed. Heather, thanks for taking this on. Good topic. It feels like we're hearing more and more about ADHD. Is that because it's on the rise? What does the data tell us?
Yeah, we are hearing more about it. You're hearing more about it. We're finding it in our homes. We're finding it with our neighbors, in schools. We're just hearing a lot about this, right?
Yeah.
And we're quick to think, okay, maybe it's an overdiagnosis. Maybe we're throwing this around a lot. And what doctors are actually saying is, it's not necessarily that we're overdiagnosing. We are hearing more about it. There are a lot of cases, meaning we're hearing about it, but it's really because mental health is on the rise, meaning we're more open to addressing it. We know the symptoms and the signs, and so we're giving it more attention. So it's not so much that 20 years ago it didn't exist. It's just that now we have names and words and treatments, and we're looking at it. It's acceptable now to have a struggle in your children and it be mental health and to go in and get help for it. And so that's the difference. That's why we're hearing so much more about it.
So we can't even say there's more kids with it. It's just an awareness.
It is. There's a huge awareness, and they're really tagging it to the awareness more than we have this giant influx, right? We're just more aware. We know what's happening.
I think of that moment as a parent, though, when you may have been grappling with, mental well-being or overall behavior, and finally hearing some sort of a diagnosis that in your gut you maybe already knew or suspected. Some relief with that. I think a lot of overwhelm in that moment. And you have some things parents can do after the diagnosis. First, you say there's a process that has to happen.
There is, and it is overwhelming, right? There's this process that occurs where you really have been worried and wondering and questioning. And so one of the first things we want to do is process what's actually gone on. And what we mean by that is we're first most likely going to feel a little bit of relief, and parents can feel some guilt for that. When you've been wondering and now you have a diagnosis, there's relief because now we have a name and we feel like we can move forward. So it's okay to process all the feelings that parents are going to feel. Parents are also going to need to process some blame, which they usually go to next, where they tend to look at it and question, have I done something? Did I cause this? Remember, parenting doesn't cause ADHD. It impacts parenting, but our parenting didn't cause them to have that. And so they're going to process that blame where they make it about them. They also are going to need to process all of the emotions that come with needing to recognize that maybe what they saw or envisioned for their child's future is going to shift, or they're going to need to go about it in a different way.
Well, that's heavy. That taps into, I don't want to be too dramatic, but grief. That taps into a grief emotion.
It does, and we need to sit with that as parents and allow ourselves to process those emotions. A really great way to go about that is to simply ask yourself, what am I telling myself about this diagnosis?
Okay.
It's this really key question. Just sit and ask, what am I telling myself about this? And what you'll find is that kind of your fears and your insecurities, they'll rise up, they'll answer that question, and then you can know the emotions that you're looking to process. When this comes in, we're quick to attend to our kids, and we should. But when you get a diagnosis, we don't take enough time as parents to take a step back and say, what is it that I need in order to also navigate this new diagnosis? And that's where we're going to start. We're going to process those emotions.
It feels like that first step of processing does really cater to the emotional side of it, and then reality sets in. And that's sort of the next step, is embracing what is.
What is, and that it is going to be different, and that that's not bad or wrong. There's nothing bad or wrong with a child with an ADHD or ADD diagnosis. The reality is it's just going to be different. And so what we tend to do as parents is we look at that situation and we still try to make them normal, if we're going to use that word. We still try to fight against that the diagnosis has come in. One of the ways we can accept reality as parents is gauge. If we're using the word should or shouldn't a lot, if those words are a part of our vocabulary, we're probably not doing a really healthy job accepting reality.
Okay.
Well, they should be able to focus, or they shouldn't handle it that way. Instead of accepting, with this new diagnosis, we have a better understanding of how these kids or our teenagers are going to process. So ask yourself, am I using those words a ton after this diagnosis comes down? If we are, we're probably not in an acceptance space yet. We want to drop those words, and instead we want to look at that child and accept that whatever they give us is where they're at. and that's enough.
Because this does become very individual, right? Despite what a doctor is telling you, despite, a presented path towards success, you're still dealing with an individual whose symptoms or reactions could vary quite greatly.
They vary in a million ways, right? So you want to look at that child and say, whatever they're offering today, that's where we're at. And that's the reality of it. The reality is today, there's a struggle to focus because they're making their decisions based off of emotions. We're going to accept that.
Right, but there's no should in that day's plan.
Right.
You want parents to know their story. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, when we get a diagnosis like this and there's a change in our family system, we're going to need to tell people about it. And one of the ways that as parents we can feel strong and empowered and in control, because something like this helps us feel very out of control, puts us in that position, is to know how we're going to tell this story. Who's going to get the story, what we're going to say about it, and what we're going to say when we're delivering that message, what's happening, the intent of that message. So lots of times we tell too many people or the wrong people this story. Oftentimes we explain it from a place of embarrassment or from the deficit instead of from the strengths. And so we want to actually know what we're going to say to other people. What are you going to say when a teacher comes to you and says, your child is having a hard time concentrating with math in 4th grade? We want to know the story that we're going to tell. It empowers us as parents to be able to tell our story.
As you're talking, I'm sort of thinking of that 1990s corporate advice to have your elevator pitch.
Yeah.
and the story will vary, and obviously we're talking about a human and not a business. But I think I'm hearing you say that the practice is similar in that we want to put up our wall and no, not our wall, but you know what I'm saying, put up our story and know how to connect and how to share that story with the right people.
We want to know it. If we can know it and then have the power to deliver it, we then feel in control. We can be an advocate for our kids when we need to, and then it isn't something bad, right? It's not a negative thing.
And that story won't be shared with everybody.
It won't be, no.
You do want parents to prepare for criticism.
Because there will be criticism. ADHD or ADD brings with it outward behaviors that are sometimes different than what other kids or teenagers might be doing. And so you can prepare yourself to know that there will be criticism that comes. People will say and question how you parent, or if you discipline, or if you're handling things right. And we want to be prepared for that criticism. The best way we can do that is ask ourselves, how do I want to show up or behave when someone offers criticism? Who do I want to be when someone questions how I'm disciplining my child in public or what my child just did in that classroom?
Now,
who do I want to be and how do I want to show up? And we want to make sure that we do that.
You said something a minute ago I want to drill down on. You said don't respond from a place of deficit, but rather parent from a place of possibility.
Right.
That sounds very hopeful and very inspiring. Put that into a concrete definition for us.
And it will change. If we're looking at the possibilities instead of the deficits, it's going to change how I describe things to other people.
Okay.
Right? It's going to change the way that I view that child that I'm offering love towards or helping work through something challenging. So when we're focused on the deficit, we tend to then even tell our story from a place of deficit. We tend to introduce our children to other people from a place of deficit, almost like a warning. Like we bring our child in and we say, hey, so they're going to struggle here and they're not very good at this and they're going to give you trouble here. And that tends to be how our elevator pitch with them, right? If we're looking at the possibilities, we're going to go in and we're going to see and be able to explain to someone, for example, they're amazing at concentrating on things they love to do. Well, that is very different than going in and saying, hey, they're not going to be very good at focusing today. That is a completely different message.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure that we're functioning from a place of the possibilities. It's the same in our response when we're getting criticism. We want to go from that place of possibility, where when someone comes to us and says, did you know your child, or have you ever thought about, or why do you do it this way, to look at them and say, thank you for that feedback. And we're really comfortable with the plan we have in place with our son. Thank you for caring. That's from a possibility space instead of there's something wrong and a deficit space. But to have that verbiage and to know how to respond to people, it is really important for parents when a diagnosis like this comes in.
Those words frame your child.
They do.
And that frame becomes something people look at and take on. Heather, thank you. Thank you so much. Heather has a private practice where she coaches families and individuals. You can find her contact information on the Studio 5 website.